Um,
Thank you, Shanu. A very good afternoon to all of you. It's indeed a pleasure, an honor, and a privilege to be speaking here at Diabetes India 2025. Uh, Today, my topic is extremely relevant, I felt, because of the way the food industry is going and the way our children are, dependent on the takeaways and the ultra processed foods which they are eating and which they have in their diet. So, historically, if you go to see, uh, processing was developed for solving the problem of long time storage and transport of foods. So, when we talk about processing, we always uh, go out. Uh, so historically, the processing was developed for solving the problems of long time storage and transport of foods. We when we think about processing, when we talk about processing, we always think that it's something bad. But, you know, a normal whole food is actually inedible to eat. So we need to process. We need to do something to that food to make it edible. But unfortunately, recently processing has also targeted the palatability and the production of indulgent products. So, something easy to cook, easy to make, or which can stay for a longer time. Which can be more shelf stable, which can stay in the markets and the malls for a longer time. And of course, we all have somebody staying in the US or or Europe or UK, and we want to give our children and our family people all Indian foods. So we try to see, look for foods which are, they can go and just put water and make upma or make pav bhaji. So that is what we are also kind of encouraging in our daily lives. Unprocessed or minimally processed foods are whole foods in which almost all the nutrients are quite intact, and this food is in its near natural state. They are minimally altered by removal of inedible parts, drying, crushing, roasting, boiling, freezing, pasteurizing to make them edible and suitable to store. Processing changes a food from its natural state by adding salt, oil, sugar, or other substances. So, if you want to identify what is a processed food, then you can say that it will have about 3 to 4 ingredients, not more than that. But nowadays, we hear a lot about ultra processed foods. So, what are ultra processed foods? They are foods that have been altered, that is, changed to include fat, starches, sugars, salts, hydrogenated oils, and additives like colors or flavor enhancers, taste enhancers, and they are made in such a nice way that you go back to eating more of those. So I came across a very nice article in Newsweek about toxic food, and today morning also, while we were sitting for the inauguration, a doctor also talked about the toxic food industry which we are, having. So it's like ultra processed foods are like Frankenstein's monster, changed by science until they are almost unrecognizable from their original form. So they become a patchwork of ingredients, additives, and preservatives. The definition of ultra processed foods was coined by Carlos Monteiro, professor of nutrition and public health from the University of Sao Paulo, Brazil. And he and his collaborators analyzed how population's diet has changed since the 1980s. He, in his article, has written that there is a very obvious decline in the use of sugar and dietary fats. People have become more, conscious. So they are not, like, we are not including sugar in our tea. Okay. But what are we doing? At the same time, we are eating some packet with our tea, which is without sugar. So in that packet, we are definitely having some extra salts, some extra fats, and some extra sugars. So he, developed a food classification which is known as Nova food classification, and which is based on the level of processing. So in this Nova food classification, there are four groups. The group one is almost, you can say, whole foods, unprocessed or minimally processed foods, which would include fruits and vegetables and whole grains. The group two would be the same foods of group one, which are slightly processed. So they have some processed ingredients. Group three would be the foods from group 1 and group 2, but they will be processed still more, with the addition of oil, salt, or sugar. And group 4 is the ultra processed food, which probably is food from group 1, but it is not identifiable in group 4. So the whole food, the food from group 1 is transformed to make it look something else. But this Nova system has got its plus and minus. There are some strengths, like, uh, uh, it is novel, can lead to, in theory, new insights on health effects, additives, and processing, and highlighting the problems in the global food system. And the food industry is forced to make some pay more attention, and actually maybe write about the food labels. You need to write how, what is there in that food, present in the food. But there are also weaknesses where, some healthy foods will be doomed unhealthy without true evidence. Some healthy foods are not taken into consideration. So there is more confusion than clarity. All food additives, whatever you add, even if you add some, cinnamon, but because you say that, okay, it's a fifth item which you are adding, so people might think that cinnamon is also not good for health. So it strengthens the mistrust to food industry, increases tension between the consumer groups and industry, because we are always scared. We always talk about how, even during our conferences, we always talk about how a particular food industry is sponsoring some event and why they should be entering this kind of a conference. uh, the Indian Council of Medical Research and National Institute of Nutrition has also come up with this, a very busy slide, but you can go online and check this whole thing. And they have also, categorized the food processing based on the foods on the based on extent of processing, and the nutrition, that is the energy, like less than 250 calories, around 500 calories, and more than 500 calories. They have grouped the foods in three: group A, group B, group C. Group C being the ultra processed foods. So, what are these ultra processed foods? What are the characteristics? And I have written the word flavors of everyday life, because people are loving it. And that is the tragedy. That is why we have to be scared, because people are loving it. So, what is that characteristic of the ultra processed foods? So they have been accounted for more than half of all the calories consumed in some developed countries. So in some developed countries, people are eating only ultra processed. And the developing countries like India is fast catching up. So, when when I have to prepare such talks, I always go through what's happening in the world. And it's very unfortunate to say that, when you see a photo, a picture of a child going with the mother, where she's working, maybe she's picking up rags on the road, or so obviously they are low income group, but that child has one packet in her hand. So you must have seen such pictures, and that's really a sad state of affairs in rural India today. If you go to any hill station, you will only get Maggie. If you go to any hill station, you will have chai ka dhaba, and you will have all those packets of food which are hanging on the food dhabas. So they are affordable. They are highly profitable for their producers, heavily flavored, aggressively marketed, and sold in supermarkets around the world. And so Montero and his colleagues have observed that from evidence around the world that these group 4 items are leading the consumers to replace regular, freshly prepared meals and dishes with snacks anytime and anywhere. I get patients in my clinic who are working girls, and I'm very proud when I hear that, okay, these girls are working and they are earning and they are on their own feet. But then when they tell me what they do and how they eat during the day, it's really scary that what's going to happen to tomorrow, what's going to happen to there when they become mothers, right? So, when we think of processing, immediately this figure comes to my mind, that the anatomy of wheat, where uh, there is bran, there is germ, and there is endosperm. And you can say that the bran and the germ have most of the nutrients in the wheat kernel, whereas the endosperm, which is almost 83% of the grain, that has mostly all carbohydrate, little bit of protein, and slight B complex. But when the processing happens, when you convert the wheat, you are not going to, wheat is inedible, you have to process it, you have to make it into a flour. So when you make the wheat into flour, you get broken wheat, you get whole grain flour, you get menda, that is the refined flour, and you get semolina, that is the suji. So here the whole grain flour and the broken wheat will have some nutrients intact, but the semolina and the menda will not have anything. They are pure refined wheat flours. So I can give you an example of bread. Bread is itself a class 3 food, in the food processing thing, it's class 3, but we still make it ultra processed. We convert it to class 4 by adding wheat gluten, barley, rye malt. So as more and more ingredients are added to the bread, from processed bread it becomes ultra processed. Simple thing like a hamburger or even a pizza which you make at home. So you will have some vegetable, some patty which you make at home, vegetable, that is tomato, lettuce, everything. And you might have a good quality cheese. Emmental cheese is the original Swiss cheese. It it is converted to class 4 ultra processed by adding the industrially manufactured cheddar cheese, the non-vegetarian bacon and everything which you put, the mayo which you use, which is ready from the market. So all these industrial things will make a simple hamburger or a sandwich or a pizza into a ultra processed uh, burger. So how do you identify ultra processed foods? Minimally processed corn, which is converted to canned corn, which is processed, and you make corn chips, which is ultra processed. Apple, apple juice, apple pie, potato, baked potato, French fries, carrot, carrot juice, carrot cake, wheat, flour, which is ultimately converted to cookies. So that's ultra processed. So, how does it look like? How does this diet look like? They are mass produced, frozen and shelf stable, fast food dishes, pastries, buns, cakes, breakfast cereals, cookies, biscuits, sausages, carbonated soft drinks. And I think all of these things we all are eating sometime during the day. Why is it hazardous? Because it is easy to chew, no fiber, fast to consume. So it's easy, fast, often higher energy. So you feel satisfied with little food, sometimes lower in protein. Protein is very expensive. So they are not going to add protein to these foods, lower in phytochemicals, lower in nutrients, often higher in salt, more palatable. Once you eat a packet of chips, you want to drink more water, so you try to have a soda with it or you have a beer with it. Often refined carbohydrates, low in fiber, very high saturated fat, trans fatty acids are very high, bad for gut microbiota and immune function. Uh, so these foods are a key driver to many chronic diseases, like all these metabolic diseases here mentioned here. Uh, there are a lot of studies which are now being done. The first randomized control study by Kevin Hall was done in 2019, but it was a very small and a short duration study. So we they did find body weight changes correlating with the consumption of ultra processed foods, but this is a very small study. Also, you can see the volume, the difference in the foods here. The minimally processed and the ultra processed, how the size is different, the volume and the structure of the diet is different. Uh, Another study which concluded that greater exposure to ultra processed food is linked to higher risk of adverse health outcomes, particularly the metabolic disorders. So, uh, but again, there are very few studies. Uh, Now, new foods are coming out. That is the plant foods which are converted to meat-like texture and meat-like taste. So, what are these? Uh, how much time? 2 minutes? Over? Okay. I'll just quickly go through this. So we need to study whether, right now no studies available which showed vegan or vegetarian ultra processed plant protein sources would increase the risk versus the animal based protein sources. And the Western diet is unfortunately called sad diet. And it is a complete opposite of the Mediterranean diet, which we know is healthy and which we know is very good for us. So the ultra processed dietary pattern of USA is the standard American diet, which is called a sad diet. There was the International Congress on Obesity last year, and these are the highlights. I will not go through because I don't have the time. Uh, but the way forward, need for public health campaigns, prohibiting or heavily restricting advertisements for UPF. At least we can request our celebrities not to pose for the ultra processed foods. Acknowledge warnings, just like green and red triangle which we should put something for UPFs. Calls for heavy taxation. There is some good news here that in the pre-budget paper, they are thinking of putting some extra tax on the ultra-processed foods. I hope that happens. And thank you so much. So every time you eat or drink, you're either feeding disease or fighting it. Thank you so much.